Hello everybody, Kris Overstreet, the Redneck Gaijin here, doing voiceover after the fact because for at least part of these streams, the microphone was not picking up in OBS, so my voice was lost during all the streams that I did on this F1 2020 MyTeam Career Mode run. What with the new F1 2021 dropping in mid-July, or at least that's if it holds to schedule, I decided I was going to rush through the one season of MyTeam Career Mode to see what it's like and to show you viewers just how bad I am at this game. I'm just barely beginning on driving with a force feedback wheel, and to be perfectly honest, most of my racing game experience before now has been on Mario Kart. So let's see how we got on with our first 5 races, shall we? In MyTeam Career Mode, you make your own avatar, or as close as you can make it to yourself. There obviously aren't any fat people like me in Formula 1, and you have to keep your facial hair trimmed very, very short for fire safety regulations. So here I am as Kris Overstreet, myself, number 22, my junior high basketball number. And since there's no Kris or Overstreet in the automated voiceover, I chose Old Timer for when the narration refers to me as a person during the gameplay. In MyTeam Career Mode, you run your own race team. And that means getting your own sponsors and funding, like I'm doing here now with Loop, who I think is a fictional outfit. They're going to pay me $5 million just for signing them as my primary sponsor. Yay for us. But not only do you pick your sponsors, you get to pick from one of 4 engines that are used, or were used, in Formula 1 during 2020. Honda, Renault, Mercedes, and Ferrari. The Ferrari numbers in 2020 were a bit cooked because they were based on 2019 season numbers, and it turned out that Ferrari was being a little bit cheaty with those, so they got kind of nerfed in updates to this game. Mercedes is considerably cheaper than Ferrari and has almost as good performance and durability, so I decided to go with that. The next step, of course, is picking a teammate, and since you're just starting out as a brand new team in Formula 1, you're not going to be able to get any of the top people. You're going to have to pick from Formula 2 drivers, most of whom are young and inexperienced, and some of whom are really terrible. None of them are particularly good, so for the most part, you're going to want to go for a bargain instead of going for the top available. I decided to go with Tatiana Calderon of Colombia, because although she is, in all honesty, one of the worst drivers in the lot, she's fairly cheap. The only one cheaper than her is the GOAT himself, the most horrible driver in F2 history, Mahavir Raghunathan. And I felt a soft spot because in all of Formula 1 history, only 2 women have ever started races in Formula 1, and the most recent of those was in the early 1980s. So even though Tatiana is going to be a terrible teammate, I figured I might as well give a chance just for representation's sake. For this 2020 run, I decided to take the entire 22 race season as it would have run if not for the pandemic. We're going to use short practice length, full qualifying, that's all 3 sessions. Race distance would be 50% of what would be the real life race distance, and I decided to try 50% AI level, which is about moderate, and at the time I felt it was about as high as I dared set the difficulty, considering that I'm still fairly new on this game, and at the time I started this, I had just got the direct drive, the force feedback wheel, the Logitech G29. Not direct drive, it's run by belts and pulleys, and that had a pretty strong learning curve, shall we say. I'm going to be manually controlling DRS and ERS, but I'm using an automatic transmission. I'm using a braking assist on medium, basically call it anti-lock brakes, full traction control, full start assist, full pit assist, because again, I'm still a newbie driver, and I simply don't have the reflexes or coordination to manage things like manual gear shifts, manual fuel formula alterations, all of that on the fly and drive at the same time. In between races, you can do things like invest in facilities. Facilities give you better ability to develop your car and maintain things, and also to train your driver. And then you can also look into research and development, because Formula 1 is not just a driver's competition, it's a manufacturer's competition. Every team has its own car, and they're competing to produce the best car. In MyTeam Career Mode, you get to directly choose what parts you invest in to research and develop to give your car a little bit more speed. Between races, you can choose things for your activities based on how much time you have in your schedule between races, and each of these activities gives you bonuses to your vehicle development departments, to your teammate driver, or it gets you more team acclaim, which means you can get more sponsors, or it gives you straight up cash. Of course, some things also cost cash or give you penalties to your development. It's all trade-offs, and of course, you don't have time to do absolutely everything because there's always other special events that come up in the middle, and of course, the next race is always just down the road. The first race of the schedule is Melbourne, the Australian Grand Prix. During the practice sessions, of which I've set for 3 half-length practice sessions in this run, there are a number of different practice programs you can go through that give you bonus development points that you can use for research and development on your vehicle. You also have a number of team objectives that the team wants you to go through to prove how past developments have turned out, and those also give you a few extra development points. Now, in addition to getting development points for research and development, the practice programs also act as tutorials to teach you how to drive the car and how to get the best performance out of each track. For example, the track acclimatization program here shows you the one fast line that you need to follow at speed to get the fastest possible time. And as you can see, even on tracks that I'm semi-familiar with, like the Melbourne circuit here, I definitely need this practice in order to keep from doing crap like this. The tire management program is meant to teach you how to take care of your tires and make them last as long as possible by teaching you not to take corners too tight or to put power down too fast while you're coming out of a corner. Of course, since I've got various assists like traction assist and brake assist, that plus the low level and my usual cautious or semi-cautious driving skill meant that this, after a little bit of warm-up, was really a doddle. I had no problem whatever maxing out score on tire management. Fuel management, on the other hand, I was not so good at. The fuel management program, of course, is to show how well or how poorly you save fuel and run more efficiently by coasting into a corner rather than slamming on the brakes at the last moment. However, since I am a bit of a lead foot going straight from coasting or braking to full on the throttle, I struggled at the best of times even getting a barely passable grade on this program. And of course, I don't bother with the techniques at all for the race proper. ERS, on the other hand, well, it's meant to teach you how not to use up all your ERS in the course of a lap while still maintaining a minimum time. However, thanks to the 50% AI here, I can technically go an entire lap without touching the overtake button, so I'm basically getting the maximum possible recharge out of my ERS, which puts me firmly in the purple, to the point that occasionally I'll just touch the button once or twice just to show that yes, I am actually using it. Next, there's the race strategy program, which is simply taking the stuff from the other 3 programs thus far and putting it together for a series of between 3 to 5 laps, each of which has to meet a minimum delta time to show how well you're taking care of your tires and your fuel and your ERS. The better you do at this, the better you'll do in the race. Because, of course, except for 5-lap specials, these races are all fairly long and require a good bit of strategy in order to win. Incidentally, each program gives you data that you can study to try to improve your driving style and to get an idea of how you perform, if your mind actually goes that way. Thankfully, this is enough of an arcadey style game as opposed to a full-on sim, where you don't need to learn this if you don't want to. Finally, there's the qualifying sim, which is just that. It's basically hot lapping around the track, doing a dead-on same conditions as if you're qualifying for a race. At the end of practice, you get to see how many resource points you and your partner have earned. Of course, since your partner, in the first season at least, is going to be an F2 newbie, they're not going to give you very many resource points. So with that concluded, it's on to qualifying for the Australian Grand Prix. Qualifying in Formula One goes in a round of 3. The first round has all the runners, after which 5 are eliminated. The second round eliminates 5-1, leaving a final round for the top 10 shootout to determine the final position on the starting grid. As qualifying continues, more rubber is laid down on the track, which makes the track a little bit faster. So ideally, the later that you can start out in a qualifying session, the faster you'll go. Of course, the trade-off is the later you start out, the less likely you are to actually get a lap in. And sometimes 2 or even 3 laps are desirable, or at least attempts at laps, to make sure that you get some time or other on the board, because things do happen. In my case, 1 attempt was more than sufficient to get me through first qualifying session, and the second qualifying session likewise. But on my second run of Q3, well, as you can see here, Alexander Albon just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. I ended up cutting a corner to get around him, which kind of threw me off. And then the last couple of corners completely discombobulated me, and thus I was unable to improve on my time, which was only good enough for second. Still on the front row, but not quite pole position. Now, in Q2, I had qualified on the medium tires, which let me start on those tires during the race. That meant I could take 1 less pit stop, which would get me to the end of the race a little bit faster. So, starting on medium tires while everyone else in the top 10 is on the red soft tires, here we go, and it's off to a smoking start. Valtteri Bottas on pole gets just ahead of me while I curve over to the right to get on the racing line, and the problem is all the practice laps that I'd run were on less than a full tank, and fuel adds weight to this already lightweight car in a hurry, and I simply was not prepared at this point for the sheer inertia that I was having to deal with. That plus the fact that I didn't have the Logitech G29 properly calibrated or running. At this point, I didn't even have the program to make it run. So I was having to oversteer every single time, full 920 degree rotation, having to move massively to get any kind of turn at all. In between that and the medium tires, which are slower than softs because they have less grip, it was all that I could do to just try to keep contact with Bottas and keep Hamilton in the rearview mirror, so to speak. But then on lap 3, DRS becomes enabled, and that opens the door for Hamilton to start reeling me in. By the end of lap 4, as we see here, he's just right on my butt and ready to take place at P2. All it took was 1 error, and there it was. I knew that I was beat, I wouldn't be able to keep Hamilton out, so I moved over and let him by for now. After all, his tires being softs are going to wear out quicker. I'm on the mediums, I'm going to be able to go longer, and that should, I figured, make all the difference in the long run. All I had to do was keep from losing any more places and keep on Hamilton's tail until he and Bottas pitted. And keep on his tail I did, or at least as much as possible. Of course, my own little errors here and there, nearly going off the track on numerous occasions, kept me from re-overtaking him, which would have been quite possible once his soft tires started to go off the cliff. But I stuck with him, despite having to save the car like that, and even at the worst, less than 2 seconds away, and 8 laps in, his tires are going off the cliff, and Bottas, I'm beginning to catch up to Bottas as well. Again, all I have to do is stay right behind him. At the end of lap 9, Hamilton comes in and gives me one last gift of DRS, so I open up the rear wing and put the pedal to the metal, running after Bottas, knowing that he's going to pit at the end of the next lap, which will leave the lead of the Australian Grand Prix entirely to me. Sure enough, he's in, and I'm gone. P1, open track ahead, and tires that are still a little ways away from my designated pit stop. 2 laps later, and it's my time to come in to get onto the hard compound tires for the rest of the run to the line. Everyone else is also going onto hard tires, so the question is, were my extra 2 laps out on the track enough to gain on Hamilton and Bottas? And as it turns out, I come out within a second of Bottas, so I've gained at least a second on him, and more importantly, I am over 2 seconds ahead of Hamilton as I come out of the pits. And from there, I just keep building on that, chasing down Bottas because although we're on the same compound of tires, mine are 2 laps newer and therefore have more wear left in them and more room to give it the beans. By the start of lap 14, thanks to DRS, I have pretty much caught up with Bottas, and I'm just looking for any opening. And then coming up on turn 4, the opening opens up, and seeing it, I send it. When I made this turn at the time, I thought there was going to be some contact involved, but as it turns out, no, that is a clean pass. A little bit cheeky, but entirely clean, no contact, and that is me in the lead without any further need of pit stops. All I have to do is just keep running and keep ahead of Bottas. Just don't look back, pedal to the metal, and full steam ahead. And in fact, I'm setting the fastest lap of anybody in the race on hard compound tires. This is a thing that practically never happens in real life, by the way. Hard compound tires, being hard and long-lasting, are also slow. But not this slow. Oh boy, Kvyat's out, and here comes the safety car, which means any work that I've just done as far as building a lead on Bottas and Hamilton has just been undone while we spend a couple of laps tootling around behind the pace car. Of course, the thing you have to remember is that in absolute terms, that pace car is fast, but compared to F1 cars, it is glacially slow and absolutely no fun to be behind. Fortunately, 2 laps later, it comes back in and it's pedal to the metal once more and giving it everything I've got to rebuild the distance I had between Bottas and Hamilton. But aside from little goofs like here and there, that was pretty much the race. At 50% AI, I had the legs on the other drivers, and I was able to easily put in consistent lap after lap faster than they could, because they were handicapped by the difficulty settings. But since accidents happen and the fastest lap is worth 1 championship point, I decided to bank a bit of ERS for a couple of laps and then go for another fastest lap attempt on lap 25, and I gave it the beans. In fact, one could say I gave it a few too many beans. That little off-road and hitting the bollard and losing my racing line cost me the fastest lap attempt, which meant that I would have to bank more ERS for one final attempt on the penultimate lap. Now you have to bear in mind that at this point, these hard tires are no longer fresh. They're better than mediums or softs would be at this point, but they are still a bit on the worn side and not as fast as they could have been. And yet I am pushing as hard, giving it all the ERS that I dare, using as much as I can for this last attempt because I'm not going to be able to get it on the final lap. Cutting corners as much as I dare without getting warnings or penalties, braking as late as I can, and just using the few tricks that I have, the little skill that I have, and a huge amount of wheel motion to keep the car on the damn track. And as you see, I've set purple sector 1, and I've also improved on sector 2. But as ever, it's going to be sector 3 that tells the tale. And almost going off just after getting into sector 3, holding it together without realizing it. I've left ERS on, I've used it all up, I've got nothing left for the final sector. Holding it together, concentrating, doing everything I can. Holding the line nice and neat, or as neat as I can, to the last couple of corners. And then getting across the line. Fastest lap by only 0.07 of a second. But that was enough because none of the AIs were getting within a mile of that fastest lap. And I come across for a comfortable first place, nearly 7 seconds ahead of the nearest AI. So of course the celebrations by the team and by me, and the usual podium scene that you'd come to expect from this game. But as I watched it, I didn't quite feel that I'd earned it because obviously I was driving on 50% difficulty. This was rated as medium difficulty, but in reality, this is a lot slower than any regular player would ever drive it. So I knew that I had to improve going forward and eventually raise that difficulty up to something that would let me respect myself whenever I got a scene like this. Because, I mean, look at this. 6.8 seconds ahead of Valtteri Bottas, 7.3 against over Lewis Hamilton. Yeah, these are absurd times, especially since the brand new car for my new MyTeam Career Mode ought to be in the lower third of the standings based on simple performance. Yeah, it was nice that I won this race, but I didn't let it swell my head because I knew it was not entirely earned. Moving on to Bahrain, where I forgot to record anything from qualifying. All you can see is, well, I got pole position, and by a pretty large margin. Once again, I qualified on mediums, starting out the race on mediums, unlike practically anybody else in the front, and away we go. And this time, even Bottas is not catching up with me much. I just hold my line, pedal to the metal, keep it straight and fast, and then cut across everybody. Bottas tries to get ahead of me here, but I've got the inside track into the next couple of corners, and I am out of there. And for the first part of the race, that really was it. Me just running ahead of the field and getting farther and farther ahead with every single lap. 50% AI on a track that I'm familiar with. No sweat whatsoever, at least not at this stage of the race. And it's worth remembering I should not be setting fastest laps on medium tires ahead of the fastest cars in Formula One on soft compound tires. This was more and more evidence building up that I had the difficulty setting too low, at least for my current skill level, but I wasn't 100% sure yet, and events later on in the race would convince me that no, I shouldn't raise the difficulty quite yet. But more on that later. By lap 10, all the front runners have pitted to go on to their medium tires for the rest of the race. I'm still running. In fact, my race engineer has given me the go-ahead to keep out for 2 laps longer because I'm taking such good care of the tires that they're wearing down more slowly. Finally, on lap 13, the tires are beginning to show some serious wear, and when lap 14 rolls around, I am more than ready to bring it in for the new hard tires. At this point, I've built up enough of a lead that I could go right back in the pit lane again and get new fresh tires, but disaster strikes just as I come out. George Russell is out, and he's triggered a safety car, which means the 20 to 40 second lead that I've got is gone. And let me underscore, this is a disaster, at least to me. After all the time that I've gained on the rest of the pack, now we're starting over the race from scratch with 11 laps to go, more or less. And so, with my tires ice cold and as low a grip as it's possible to have, the safety car goes in and I go on, rebuilding my lead all over again from the beginning. And Alexander Albon is right on my tail, and he wants to take advantage of me going wide in the first couple of corners. He's going to come up beside me and try to get his nose in. After coming out of turn 3, he's right there beside me, and it's a drag race to the end of the DRS range, but I just barely cover him off. And then, that's it. He's behind me, and he is going to stay behind me. Thank you very much, 50% AI lobotomy. And again, it's a case of running lap after lap, getting faster than the rest of the pack by leaps and bounds, and just keeping ahead, saving up ERS every once in a while for another attempt at a fresh, fastest lap. And so it went until lap 25. I got through half the lap fairly well, and was coming into the last set of S-curves, and got a little bit too greedy, got inside the curb, and put it into the wall. Disaster. Really disaster this time. Half my front wing is gone, and this was entirely self-inflicted. No one around me for ages and ages. I've just lost the rear end, lost the front wing, and now I have no choice but to bring the car in for a fresh wing, which means I am going to lose the lead, and not by a small margin either. I mean, just coming in for the new lap, I'm losing seconds every corner, because I no longer have the downforce to keep me on the track and on guide. Oh. So I would have 4 laps at most to make good on my blunder. And Hamilton's by, Bottas is by, Gasly, Ricciardo, Leclerc, Norris and Perez are going to get by. And I get out of the pit lane just in time to see Ocon pass me by. And now the red mist descends, and I'm going full on, total aggression, caution be damned. I'm going to do whatever it takes to regain as many positions as possible before the checkered flag. Ocon turns out to be fairly easy. I get him straight away, and then it's on to the next one. Yeah, Ocon was no problem whatever. Perez is up next. I try to get him and Norris in the same go. Can't quite do it. But Perez is behind me and Norris is ahead. And that was a bit of a cheeky one. That should have got a corner cutting warning, if not a penalty. But worse was to come. And I was very grateful that the stewards were looking the other direction. Norris tries to get defensive, pushes me inside. I send it into T1. We bumped wheels, but he ends up behind me, and I end up ahead of him. Because I've got the soft compound towers now, in addition to the new wing, and in no time at all, I'm up on Leclerc, Ricciardo, and Gasly, and I'm eyeing up as many of them as possible. Coming around turn 10, this tight hairpin, and into a DRS zone. I want to get around them, and I need to get around them quick because Hamilton and Bottas are way ahead, and so I get a little bit too greedy. A lot too greedy, in fact. There is no doubt about it, that was grounds to be disqualified from the race, or at the very least severely penalized. I mean, here I am again, coming around onto the DRS straight, back wing open, trying to get level with Leclerc, finding the wall in front of me, no place to go, and I cut the hell out of the corner and used Gasly as my brakes to finish making the curve. But somehow or other, I didn't get a penalty, and now it's just Bottas and Hamilton ahead of me. 10 seconds to Bottas, 12 to Hamilton, 2 laps to go, and all I can do with this empty road in front of me is push to the absolute limit. It's time to use up all the ERS, run like hell, and make up as much time as possible and pray for a miracle. Around turn 4, into the first set of S's. No sweat. On the attack, holding everything together. Hugging that guideline that nobody else can see but me, like it's my dearest, most darling lover. Getting around the tricky turn 10 almost perfectly, and then flooring it and kicking in the ERS from this straight here, heading up into the second set of S's. Full attack on the line. Get a little bit squirrely when I get too much of the curb. Pull it back in. Get around to the back straight. More ERS, floor to the pedal to the metal. Give it all that I've got. Around the final corner. Perfection. Well, almost. I should have held it out a little bit wider, obviously, to maintain speed. But as it turns out, that was the fastest lap of the race. The final lap here, well, you saw how much I gained, but I needed one more lap in order to catch Hamilton and Bottas, and one more lap was one lap I did not have. Final result, 3rd place, and after that spin out, an object lesson that maybe I'm not ready to go above 50% AI yet after all. It's worth noticing, thanks to the soft compound tires at the end, the lighter car from lack of fuel, and of course the AI, my fastest lap was 4 seconds faster than any AI car's fastest lap. So I had the potential to be really outdoing the AI cars, but the skills were still in question at this point, again, thanks to that inexcusable spin out. But there was another reason why I wasn't ready to raise the difficulty level just yet. Vietnam. Vietnam was supposed to be a new Grand Prix for the 2020 season. Obviously, it didn't happen. It's not scheduled to happen for 2021 either, and it's entirely possible that it will never be run. making this track on this game an artifact of alternate history. And in my opinion, that is a good thing, because this is one of the most hateful tracks I could ever have possibly imagined. A tight road circuit with walls everywhere, no runoff space, no margin for error, long straights that give cars with a power advantage all the advantage, combined with tight corners in perfect combinations that keep you from either holding a line or holding a rhythm. It is absolutely hateful to drive. And as you might guess, I struggled mightily with it in practice. Hell, you don't even have to guess, you just have to watch. And to make things even better, the AI are incredibly aggressive on this track in a way that they're not aggressive anyplace else. They will literally drive through you if they can, as I would find out again and again over the course of this session. So on to qualifying, and after my practice sessions, I really didn't have that much in the way of confidence here. In fact, I didn't get into Q2 by very much, but in Q2 I improved considerably, and somehow or other was able to make it into Q3, although not on the medium tires. As you can see, my time here was just not even remotely good enough. Yeah, I was the slowest of those who had set a time. I knew that wasn't going to hold up, so I had to go right back out again on the soft tires in order to get into Q3. And this is vitally important because I needed to have as many cars behind me and as few cars in front of me as possible to improve my chances of surviving to the end of this race, which I knew was going to be a big ask, especially considering how I seem to have a magnet that yanks me to every single wall on the circuit. Somehow I just squeaked through Q2 and into Q3, and then in Q3 I put in the best lap of the entire run. I still have no idea how. And it was good enough for P4. Second row, only one car directly in front of me, and then comes the strategy. Rain coming for the second half of the race. With that in mind, I decided I was going to go from soft to soft and run the second soft out until the rain hit, at which point I'd go to intermediate wet tires and finish the race on those. Oh, the best laid plans of mice and men. Anyway, here we are getting a start, and already you can see things are not going well for me at all. Getting pushed outside by Vettel and getting the blame for the collision from Vettel. I'm already drifting back in the pack, and it's not going to get better from here. It's all I can do to try to hold the car in the track, on the track. And basically, I'm building a train behind me and not able to catch up to the cars ahead. And mistakes like this one, going deep into the corner and boom, off the wall. Yeah, I didn't get damaged that time, but that was pretty much the end of my luck for this run. Finally getting to the end of lap 1, not having lost any further positions, but the train behind me is building up to epic proportions, and it's, well, all I can do is struggle to stay ahead and hope for the best. The best, of course, was not to be, as shown by the fact that this lap, the second lap, turned out to be my fastest lap of the entire race. unsteady, inconfident, trying and failing to find any line, much less a fast line. And again, it's not to be. Then on lap 4, disaster. I fail to make a corner, front wing is off, and I try to limp ahead further, but pushed out into the wall again, slammed into by Leclerc. And now I have to come in, but I'm so busy trying to figure out how to work how to confirm the change, that by the time I confirm the change, I have passed the pit entry, which means I have to limp around for another lap, getting passed by every car around me, because I cannot make these corners even with the full wing, never mind without. So I've already dropped back to 12th place, and it's going to be a long lap 5 to get to the pits. I decided to go on to intermediates early on this next pit stop while I'm getting the wing to save this pit stop, and kaboom! Grosjean and Magnussen pass me on either side, then form a rolling roadblock, which I have to dodge, and then there's no time to brake, and that little spin out and wreck leaves me in effectively stone cold last, with only Leclerc and Stroll behind me because they had to pit for broken wings. And they're not going to stay behind me for very much longer. Am I right, Leclerc? Boom again. Granted, this was at least partly my fault because I missed that same curve again, but Leclerc gave me absolutely no room, and there goes Stroll. At least he went around me wide, although I don't know if that was on purpose or not. So, in for the new wing and the intermediate tires. As you can see, the rain has started, but technically the road surface is not wet enough yet to justify these intermediate tires. So for the next lap or two, I was extremely slow, gaining no time on anybody, losing time even to Stroll and Leclerc. So yeah, this was pain on top of pain, but I just had to hope that things would come good because I was already on the inters. Everyone else would have to stop for their own intermediate tires, and at that point, if I got a safety car, maybe I would still be in the hunt. By lap 8, people are pitting, and I do get around Leclerc just barely as he comes out of the pit immediately behind me. And so now the question is, can I hold him behind me? The track is getting wetter, everybody else is on intermediates, this is the time, but my intermediates are a bit more worn than everybody else's, and let's not forget, I am shit at this track. I cannot stay on the racing line, and I am inviting Leclerc back in while letting even lap-down Latifi run away from me. So it's only going to be a matter of time before Leclerc finds his way past, or more probably through me. And with that tank slapper, a lap later, he's passed, he's gone, and all I can do is hope and pray he makes a mistake of his own that lets me get past him. I stick my nose in, send it for a dive, and he's not giving up the line to let me back in. So, fortunately, things appear to be okay for the moment, but even so, wet conditions and me unfamiliar with intermediate tires mean I am still struggling, and I am not going to get another opportunity to send it on Leclerc. In fact, that was it. I couldn't stay out of the wall, I couldn't stay on the track, and I wasn't making ground to anybody ahead of me, so I decided to save wear and tear on the engine and retire the car. After chalking up a win and a third place, here I come home with my first DNF. On to China and qualifying at the Chinese Grand Prix in Shanghai. And at this point, a few things have changed. I've got the wheel properly calibrated at this point, so I'm no longer sawing back and forth, struggling to get the thing to steer. And I'm back on a proper race course rather than a street circuit, which means I have room to make errors without killing the car. Unfortunately, as we see here, my own errors are still plenty enough to put me into deep trouble, as my one attempt at a dry compound tire as the rain is just settling in and first qualifying fails with a spin out, which means I have to rush onto intermediates when other people have put in soft compound times and hope that's good enough to get me into Q2. This time I make that corner cleanly, if very, very slowly, and I have visions of 15th or 16th in my head when it turns out Not only have I got through to Q2, but I've got through faster than a couple of the soft compound runners, the fastest of the intermediate tire runners. And Q2 and Q3 turned out to be absolutely no problem at all, and so I would begin the Chinese Grand Prix back on pole position like I was in Bahrain. Because of the rain in Q1 and Q2, I forgot to qualify on mediums, which meant I was pretty much locked into a two-stop strategy. But since my tire wear was pretty much on the low side, I decided to stretch out the softs for a couple of extra laps before going on to the hards, hopefully getting in a bit faster time on the faster compound. And as the lights went out and we raced down to T1, it was feeling like Bahrain all over again as I easily got out to a lead and started pulling away immediately. China, after Vietnam, China was just such a relief because, well, it has its good points and its bad points, but I really love the turn 1 and turn 2 curly-Q combo. It is not necessarily fun to drive, but it's really intriguing to drive through. Although, I did make several errors, for example, going way deep here and almost losing the lead to Bottas. Pulled it back on just in time and started building out my lead again. No big deal because 50% AI. So, lap 1 in the books, and even despite that big blunder, I'm nearly 2 seconds into the lead. And I'm thinking, yep, this is going to be Bahrain all over again. But then, midway through lap 3, Max Verstappen is out, and it's another safety car, which means not only am I going to lose that 3-second lead I've built up, but now, instead of pitting 2 laps later than expected, I'm going to have to pit 1 lap earlier than expected because everybody else is also going to be pitting, and I don't want to lose the lap time and position. So, into the pits, and as it turns out, no, not everybody is pitting. A lot of the lower people are staying out, and I come back onto the track just behind my teammate Tatiana Calderon. So now it's time to wait in the safety queue until the safety car comes off, at which point it will be full attack against these back markers. Safety car is off, we are racing, and Tatiana, you better move out of my way because I'm coming either around you or through you. It didn't take me too long to find a place where I could send it, and at T4, here I go, inside of Tatiana, who wisely backs out of it and gives me the position, and then it's onward and upward to George Russell. George Russell gives me a little bit more trouble, in no small part because getting around Tatiana slowed me down tremendously. But I kept on it, kept closing in, and looking for any opportunity to get around him and move further up the road. Of course, getting past the back markers is vitally important because they are slower, and the longer I have to sit behind them, the more time I'm going to be losing to the faster runners. I dispose of Russell with a dive bomb into the great carousel here, and then it's after Giovinazzi and Häkkinen coming up ahead of me. The Alfa Romeos 1-2, I get Giovinazzi coming out with a better run, out onto the long straight. Raikkonen's right ahead of me. DRS hasn't been enabled yet, but I just keep on the pedals, getting his slipstream, and then he gets a little bit defensive, tries to push me to the inside. I go ahead and take it. But that means I have to brake hard to avoid a collision with Magnussen, which allows Raikkonen to retake the position, which means I've got it all to do all over again. Eventually, a few corners later, I get around Raikkonen, and now it's sights set on Magnussen. Magnussen, I think about and then avoid a dive going into the long carousel, then get my line, hit the gas, full pedal to the metal, and get around Magnussen coming out. Good run, and it's on down the line with Daniel Kvyat next in my sights. Down the long straight I go, pedal to the metal. Not quite fast enough to get Kvyat in a dive bomb on that hairpin, which would turn out to be my happy hunting ground for the rest of the race, by the way. But I get a good enough exit and overspeed on Kvyat to get him on the inside on the last corner, and on past and with Ocon next to go. And now the DRS has been enabled, so I've got even more reason to catch up to him. I make a dive bomb attempt into corner 4, get pushed off almost into the gravel for my troubles. And then, once again, coming out of that big carousel, I get the better exit and the overspeed, and all I'm waiting for is the DRS. There we go. Ocon is also got to get DRS over Gasly, but I've got both of them. And super dive bomb, not to happen. I back out of it. I saw that I wasn't going to get Gasly, and it wasn't going to be safe to get Ocon. So, a lap again, coming out of the carousel onto the big straight. Yet again, Ocon and Gasly, and this time I'm committed. The DRS is open, full pedal to the metal. Send a Rooney deep, deep into the hairpin. But this time I've got the better exit, and I managed to stay just barely ahead of them by that much. It's a drag race out, and I have the better traction. Their medium tires are a lot more worn than mine. So, on I go. Next, it's Norris and Stroll, and here I am going deep into that same hairpin again, trying to get Norris, and it didn't quite happen. On T4 the following lap, I make it good, dive inside, push him to the outside, practically off the track, and P2 on the road is mine. Next stop, Stroll. And once again, the super long straight and the hairpin at the end of it are going to be my happy hunting ground. DRS is open. I'm pulling up on Stroll little by little. I think I'm going to get him on the outside, but then he crosses over right in front of me and hits the brakes in front, and boom! I didn't have enough time to react, and I've got wing damage on the left. Which means, guess what? New wing time in short order. But I don't have the call from the mechanic quite yet. Not until I have to pass up the pit entry. Which means going around again. And this time, I need fresh tires, but the mediums won't quite make it to the end of the race. So I'm going to have to finish the race on the hard compound. And already with this wing broken, Norris is nibbling at my heels. So it's time to come in. Of course, this pit stop going for wing is going to set me back considerably by about 7 to 8 seconds, of course. But the good news is that if everything else goes well, if I don't make any more blunders, this will be my last pit stop, and everybody else on track, including those back markers who started on the mediums, still has to make at least one more pit stop. So I'm still in with a chance. And it turns out that this pit stop is actually fortuitously timed because the back markers are just now starting to come in for their pit stops. They're going over to the hard tires to finish up the race too. And I come out right behind Nicholas Latifi and my teammate Tatiana. So of course I get it coming out of the big carousel. Just foot down and away we go. Goodbye Latifi. And Tatiana is right ahead of me. I'll be taking care of her in short order too. In fact, going right down to the end of the long straight. And then, boom, I have to break up for Tatiana, who's covered up the inside. And Latifi has tagged my rear end, broken his wing. And as Tatiana comes in for her pit stop to get over to the hards, Latifi also has to pit to get a new wing. Of course, he would have pit anyway because he needed the hard tires as well. So that's no great difficulty for him. Meantime, I'm on my way up, working my way past Stroll, who took care of my wing a bit earlier, and then he's behind Grosjean. Stroll has already pitted for the hards. Grosjean still needs to pit. And yes, it's that same long straight, and Grosjean pushes me way inside. I try to push back a bit as I get around him, then inside, and I'm past. But I need to stop taking the bait like that. In any case, now it's on. Lap 15 is ahead, and so is Lando Norris, who has pitted for his hard tires, and he's looking a bit slow and vulnerable. I make a dive around the outside, can't quite make it happen in turn 4, looking for something else, but he's got the speed here. He's going to get me through into turn 5, and still I'm holding on to his butt for dear life. And then around the outside of turn 6, can I make it stick? Can I make it go? Into turn 7 on the inside, yes. That is my position, thank you very much. And we're up into P9 on the road. On to the end of the lap, and there are various other people pitting. Hamilton, Ricardo, Leclerc is just now ahead of me. And thanks to all those pits at the same time, I'm up into P4 effective. I make it go on the inside at the hairpin towards the end of that lap. Obviously, that didn't happen. I ended up coming to a complete stop on the apex. Not a good thing. And so Leclerc, thankfully, it's his time to pit. He needs to switch onto the hard tires for the rest of the race. And Albon and Bottas have pit, so I've just inherited the lead. And as it happens, I've also inherited a hell of a lot of boredom. because for all practical purposes, that was the end of the race. With lap after lap after lap, I'm pulling ahead of everybody again. I don't need to pit, they don't need to pit, but I'm just faster than everybody because 50% AI. I've got to say, China, I'm not that fond of the big long straight. I think that big long straight, the hairpin actually makes things a bit easier on a weak driver like myself. But a lot of other parts, particularly the turn 1, turn 2 combo, these are really fun. These are really mentally interesting, and the rest of the track is quite challenging. I had a blast driving this, although my favorite part was when I was working my way back up through the back markers. So even by myself, on this fastest lap run, it wasn't quite the same as when I actually had other drivers in front of me to challenge me. And so I was thinking again, maybe I should be bumping up the difficulty a bit, because this is not everything it could be, and certainly isn't everything it should be, because I should be either the top of the back markers or the bottom of the midfield. I should not be running as strong as I'm running right now. On the other hand, I did get bumped into a couple of times, and I did ram Lance Stroll earlier and break my wing, and that was more my fault than his. So I'm still thinking about it. And ahead of me after this is going to be Zandvoort, the Netherlands Grand Prix, which is all curves and no long straight like this one. So I'm anticipating that is going to be a bit on the difficult side compared to this. Even so, I'm happy to take a win, especially after the previous horrible turnout in Vietnam, and get my way back up into the lead, even if it is kind of sort of unearned in the championship standings. There's the fastest lap of the race, and 1 lap to go, and obviously it wasn't as fast as that one was, but it was fast enough. In fact, it was so fast that I was in danger of lapping Latifi for a second time. There he is again. Here we are coming for the last time out of that gigantic carousel. Goodbye, a lap down Latifi. So sad, too bad. And that's the way it was. First place in Shanghai, on to Zandvoort. And the usual celebrations, Fabu, yay me. I did a bit more to earn this one than I did, say, at Australia. But it did still feel like a win, especially with all the driving I had to do coming up through the midfield. Even so, lap after lap of seeing no other cars is not the way I want to race, or at least not until I've raised the AI considerably. So, on to the Netherlands. And although I haven't shown it on screen here, we have been doing research and development and improving the car, and as you can see, we've passed Scuderia AlphaTauri, and we're now threatening Renault for our best car on the track. We are moving up through the mid-pack, at least in terms of car performance. Driver performance, of course, is another thing, and if you recall, the AI has been pretty heavily nerfed to make up for my drawbacks. So, I'm noticing at this point that the engine is beginning to get worn, and I want to switch out to better parts, but I've left it until qualifying, which means if I change out now, I get penalties, and it's going to take time, and I'm not going to make it on the track for qualifying. So, no new components, and 1, 2, 3, top of the qualifiers all the way across. Qualified on mediums, going for the 1 stop, same as usual, and away we go. Lights are on, and lights are out, and we are driving. And Zandvoort is a bit on the narrow side as dedicated tracks go, and is practically all curves with only 1 real long straight in the whole thing and a couple of short ones. But I just found the groove on this one, and I never looked back. It was simply amazing, curve after curve, but they're almost all fast curves. And although I did make quite a few mistakes, I could probably improve by quite a lot, I just kept running. And of course, with the AI nerfed to hell and gone, I was building up lap time after lap time, seconds every lap over the competition, no sweat whatsoever. Now, Zandvoort is a fairly short track, so by lap 14, as I'm getting ready to come in for my switch over to hard tires, I'm coming up on back markers in a hurry. In fact, there is the first back marker right now, and that's my teammate, Tatiana. She is not doing well. She's in stone cold dead last. And then I encountered something I hadn't encountered on previous races. As I got up to a back marker, since they're going a lap down, they get out of the way. The AI here on Zandvoort, if you are getting the blue flag, they actually pay attention to the blue flags. They move as they're supposed to, and that just blew my mind. Although it was not by any means universal, even so, I was flirting with getting up to... I couldn't catch Latifi before it was time for my pit stop. Slap on those white wall tires, and let's get right back out there. Yep, still in the lead by miles and miles, although I came out right next to Giovinazzi. And since I came out right next to him, he's not getting the blue flag, so he's actually racing me. Even though I am trying to lap his ass, there he is right there, and he's keeping the line. He's not letting me pass if he can help it at all. And since I can't get past him, I end up fading back a bit by a couple of minor little errors. Try to take him again, and he defends again. I have to back out of it, take the corner a little bit too tight, lose time. Still trying to get around him, can't find a way. Got to catch back up to him, but I fell back enough that when I do catch up, this time he gets the blue flag, and he has to let me by. Goodbye, Giovinazzi. Thank you for the bit of entertainment. It's one of the few bits of entertainment I would actually get, aside from driving Zandvoort, which is a really exciting track to drive in its own right. Here I am about to go past Tatiana again, and blue flag, she pulls over out of the racing line, no problem. But yeah, it feels really, really damn good when you string together corner after corner and they click. You find the groove exactly right, and it is just wonderful. More and more back markers getting past. 1, 2, 3, goodbye. I'm putting people a lap down one at a time, and it's just extraordinary. I'm coming up against a Haas there. I don't know which Haas that was, but it doesn't matter. They're both behind me now. I'm actually past. That was a Renault I just passed up. Everybody. I knew I'm going faster than people, but look at things. Of course, you saw me glance at the engine just there. I am worried because I'm getting warnings from Jeff that I'm going to lose performance in the engine. I'm a little bit worried that the engine's going to blow out on me, but I'm a lot more worried that the performance will drop off enough that the leaders will actually start making up time to me. And I don't want that because I have not got all the confidence in the world, even at 50% AI, that I can hold them off. But I keep plugging, and right now I am doing my best to get the fastest lap, even with the worn-out internal combustion engine and the worn-out turbocharger, which I'm going to get a warning in the short is going to be quote-unquote on its last legs. But even so, this was, in case you couldn't already tell, this was my fastest lap of the race. And I think that is Lando Norris up ahead of me that I'm about to lap. Let's have a closer look. Yes, that is a McLaren. So it's either Norris or Carlos Sainz, and I'm still pushing like hell. I want the fastest lap. I've already got the fastest lap, but I want to get it even faster to make sure that I hold on to that extra 1 point. And across the line, and I shaved half a second off my previous one, and that would be indeed the fastest lap of the entire race. Go way outside, get past Norris, and he is in my rearview mirror, or he would be if I had one. Anyway, he's gone, and yeah, that was about as much fighting as I would see the rest of the race. It was just limping around despite the somewhat worn engine, and of course finding more back markers to overtake. Here's Sebastian Vettel on the right. Vettel started out in 17th place. He's on one hell of a recovery drive of his own. He'll end up being driver of the day because of that. But I get around him, I kiss the back of Alexander Albon's Red Bull, then I get around him, and as you'll see in just a moment on the replay, there's Vettel. He slots in more or less behind me as I come up to Albon, kiss Albon. Vettel comes in on the inside, and then he follows me on the outside, using me as a stalking horse. Oh, you just saw there, Verstappen is out of the race at his home circuit. That kind of sucks for him. But yeah, that was kind of the limit of the excitement. Passing another Renault, it's just back marker after back marker, but the back markers, I'm working my way farther up through the roster here. I mean, that there, I think that was Latifi down 2 laps. And here's Tatiana again. I'm going to put her down 2 laps in just a moment. Think about it. The track is so short and I'm driving that aggressively that I'm getting people 2 laps down. And then here's Checo Perez. Whoop. Of course, even despite all that, I was able to very nearly put it in the wall and repeat Bahrain all over again. So instead of putting it up 10%, maybe I should only put up the AI 5%. Anyway, last lap, I've caught up to Checo, and there's him 1 lap down. And now more back markers. I think this is George Russell I'm coming around. Hello and goodbye, George. And then there's more back markers ahead, but we're coming up. This is the last of the chicanes. Then there's only a couple of curves left after this. So yeah. There's a Haas. Goodbye, Haas. I don't know which Haas that was off the hand. But can I get any more into the last corner? Nope, not quite. Was about to put Giovinazzi 2 laps down at the end. Couldn't quite get him before the line. Even so, another dominating first place. And now I have absolute proof I need to turn up the AI. Yeah, a bunch more celebrations. Yay, yay, more spraying champagne. At this point, I know I have not earned this. I mean, look at this. Only 5 cars on the lead lap at the end, and I was on Lance Stroll's heels at the very end of that. He was only about 3 or 4 seconds ahead of me on the road when I caught the checkered flag. And Grosjean, Russell, Calderon, Latifi, 2 laps down. That was just incredible. In the literal sense of the word, I cannot believe I did that well. So, moving on after 5 Grand Prix in my MyTeam Career Mode, I am leading the championships, and I am going to be turning up the AI slightly for future races, but not a bunch because in the near future is Monaco, the toughest race in the entire calendar. This has been Kris Overstreet, the Redneck Gaijin. Thanks for watching this video, and let me know if you prefer seeing edits like this, if you'd rather see one race at a time, or if you'd rather see the whole race unedited with full sound, which I couldn't do this time because I lost the microphone. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again with more F1 2020.